Hello, everybody, and welcome to Breaking Story with Young Screenwriters. I'm Alexie.
And I'm Adam.
And today we are having a conversation about a few different things. Kind of the writer's strike that's going on, and then writing more broadly, and kind of rediscovering passion for writing and why we all love to do it. So, the writer's strike, though, something to start with.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, this is a moment where I think at not the world, but at least the country and the film industry and the American film industry is having a moment of reflection and debate over, the value of writers. And it's literally about, well, what do writers create? What value does it have in the system that exists currently? And how can that be, the value that creates, the huge profits and the millions and millions of people around the world who connect with those stories, that transferring tangibly to the writers, right? Because right now we have a system where ever since the switch from streaming to streaming, we've had the Hollywood companies basically do everything in their power to devalue revenue and devalue turn the writer's career into the gig economy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the issue that's happening right now. The residuals that a writer makes on a streaming show are like embarrassing.
I literally saw one where like this writer got two checks from residuals. One was 2 cents and one was 1 cent. Like,
yeah, even wildly successful shows. Like I remember one of the lead writers of Handmaid's Tale tweeted about how she made the residuals she made, like at the height of its popularity, was like 10,000 a year.
Yeah,
10,000 a year as like one of the lead writers of one of the most successful shows that's making millions and millions and millions in value.
Yeah, and the thing to compare it with Hulu, too, is like the executives. The executives are making those millions and millions and millions, and that's kind of like a lot of the issue.
Yes.
It's not like these are secretly not making money, or that this is not a lucrative thing that they're offering. It's just that,
I mean, there is the complex aspect of the revenue model is different, right?
Right.
Advertising got killed. Syndication models got killed. Home video got killed, right? So there is an issue of the organization of money is different, and the protections and long-held structures that the industry had built to protect writers and directors and actors around those revenue models are now being obsolete to streaming, web-based content. And in 2008, 2007, one of the big wins actually that the Hollywood companies tried to fuck the unions over with was they tried to, in 2007, 2008, they tried to get web-based content, broadly speaking, to be non-union dependent. And the Writers Guild, which would have been basically like, oh, it's a Netflix show, we don't have to pay unions at all, right? That's what they tried to do. And they were unsuccessful, right? That was something that was fought for wisely, and I think AI generated content is another aspect of the conversation, not the full aspect of the conversation, where there's very specific proposals in the WGA agreement about like what does a written by mean, and that it has to be a person, that the literary content created by an AI has to ultimately be accredited to a person and then paid out to a person, right? Like these are all things that are being talked about, and it's very noticeable that the studios have not countered really with that. Like they want to secretly cut writers out. They want to devalue writers because it's profitable. It's the business model.
I've seen like in summary that it really like there's a lot of asks and there's a lot of stuff floating around, but in summary it really comes down to what I understand is setting up a system that's fair for getting residuals on streaming for writers.
Yes.
And then also setting up rules for how, like what you were saying, AI is going to work with this. Because I know that some companies are already doing a thing where they're having robot, like they're having AI write the first draft of a script and then hiring writers to do a rewrite, which is going to
which
be
is a hellscape situation.
horrible. Yeah. And so that's something that I believe that is something that they're trying to make sure can't happen. Getting hired to
Yeah.
rewrite AI, which
And
you know,
another
fair.
aspect is the other form of exploitation and cost cutting is these mini rooms that streaming platforms are using before they greenlight to develop. So they pay people like really badly, or one or two writers do a lot of preparatory work in a mini room before a show is greenlit to get them to do basically free work
Yeah.
or cheap work.
And I understand.
And
Yeah.
understaffing shows in general to be like, well, a staff writer costs about $5,000 a week. So why don't we just have two for the whole season
Yeah.
rather than usual 6 to 8?
Yeah.
Which one of the reasons shows aren't as good. Like shows are not as good when people are stretched thin and not able to collaborate. Or even another aspect of it is that studios have streaming platforms haven't been paying writers to come to set because that's all been virtual. They have them Zoom. And like I remember there's a great New Yorker article I highly recommend people read, which is Why Writers Are Miserable, which is about the strike right now. But it cites this example of one of the writers from The Bear who never got to go to set, not even once. Which, and when you say, I think like, oh, TV at its height of the golden age, TV's a writer's medium, you know, like
That's what used
that's
to be
so
said.
weird. That's such a
Yeah.
division. Yeah, it used to be said. Yeah.
Yeah. I know that for me, I've seen some of this in just like the difference between what was taught to me was going to happen and then what actually happened when I started meeting with production companies and executives and stuff, such as you're meant to be paid for treatments. You know, like that is
Yeah.
a thing that you are meant to be paid for. And something I've encountered more than once is that you'll have an open writing assignment, you'll meet with them, they'll basically ask you to write a treatment on what they're talking about. And it's there is some like it makes sense in a way because they want to know your take, but also they're asking for too much. Like when they keep going back and forth with you and like having you edit it and you haven't signed anything yet, it's pretty exploitative.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the game you have to play right now for a lot of people. Um, and I believe that, yeah, it's about time that we started addressing this stuff.
Yeah. And it's, this is, I mean, it's been said more eloquently and more accurately by other people, but this is a fight for writing, TV writing, and film and television writing in general as a career, as opposed to an exploited gig economy. Like this
Yeah.
is like an existential fight, you know, and
Who
it will
was
affect
it?
the quality of shows.
Some showrunner basically articulated like they want to make writing into the same type of thing as like an Uber driver in terms of
Yeah,
payment.
gig economy.
And yeah, and we all know how exploited Uber drivers are. And it kind of just highlighted everything messed up about the gig economy overall. But yeah.
This is a great question about the DGA contract is up in June. Do we think they'll strike as well? I have no idea. You know, obviously, nobody knows except the people in those negotiating committees, and at the time they make that. But it would be absolutely wonderful if the other unions in solidarity also sort of put pressure. Like if
I know a
SAG
lot of
and
SAG
DGA,
people are
Teamsters.
SAG people are showing up, maybe as individuals, but they are like,
Well, there's a
yeah,
difference between like the union itself leveraging pressure in the negotiation process and some individuals expressing support, right? Um, yeah, it's very complicated politically, but you know, there's an aspect of the reason one of the reasons why the Writers Guild has gone on strike more than any other union in Hollywood is because there is they've Hollywood is the producers and studios have exploited the perception difference in value between other unions, right? Like the DGA is and members of the DGA are seen as more valuable than writers, and
mm,
that has been exploited since since the 40s, right? Um, Writers have always been treated badly, but there was the deal where, well, but you'd have a good career and you'd make money, and you're the baseline. But at the end of the day, Charlie Kaufman said it really well in his WGA speech like a month ago, which was obviously a precursor to the strike being announced, which is nothing they do has value without us.
Yeah.
And that is true. They can do nothing of value. You can maybe make reality television shows, and I do like reality television shows, but we're going to see a lot of those. But this matters, and it matters that writers are compensated well and are able to have careers, because it will affect the ultimate life cycles of shows and the quality of them. And
Yeah.
there's definitely like language in a lot of these streaming platforms' visions for the future. Like Netflix is talking about how it wants to focus on secondary screen content which basically means shows you can watch in the background while you're doing something else.
Interesting. I hadn't even heard about
Like
that.
to intentionally write shows that are like kind of just trashy and low quality, like to put that into their business model. Be like secondary screen content, yeah, don't really pay attention to it, but like it's on in the background.
Good Lord. And I mean, I guess this is
Isn't
probably
that
the
depressing?
first time in history where people keep saying, like, oh, writers, you don't really need them. And this is the first time in history where it could possibly be true on the horizon, as in like AI. Like, literally
Yes,
speaking, you could make a film based on a script written by AI. Right now, it would not be that good.
but it could be eventually, right? And we have to make a
Probably
decision
soon.
about,
Yeah.
and like we need to make a decision in these negotiations in the future about like, okay, we, we need protections for if you're going to do a union contract project, you need human beings, right? Like I think that's important. I think it's
I
important
agree.
not just from a economic point of view in the short term, but I think it's important from like kind of a philosophical view of like if we're just having machines make regurgitations of
Yeah.
content. Not to say that an AI script can't be good, but by definition, especially with these chatbots, they're scraping the internet for existing content and then like creating based on that. So all it is ultimately is a regurgitation rather than it's a regurgitation rather than a creation, um,
Yeah.
from a human being. And I think that matters. That does matter, and that's still true.
Yeah.
That's the difference, even if you can't tell the difference.
I saw this one picket. The picket signs, obviously, from the writers are fantastic because they're
Some of
writers.
them are.
And I saw one that was like, chat GPT will never have childhood trauma. Like, and that,
That's right. That's really
yeah,
funny.
yeah. And, that's true. But at this point in time, AI can't create. And I think that that's sort of like if I understand right, that's sort of like a philosophical question at this point. Like, could it ever actually create, or will it always be iterations and like combinations of things that already exist? But right now, it can't actually create. It can just put together things that have already been done before. And sometimes that might be in a way that feels unique, but nothing that it makes is truly original or unique. And that's another point. But I love the idea of AI as a tool for writers, which I think is
For
something really
sure.
cool to talk about and to consider. Like, I don't want a studio giving me a script that an AI wrote and my pay is cut in half because all I'm doing is rewriting them.
Yeah,
But if I'm working on a script, I've already found AI to be a really fun tool to kind of get ideas. Um, I know, Adam, you've said this before, it's only as good as what you put into it.
that's
But
right.
especially with things like, again, as I always like to talk about, I love world building, and it's really great for pointing you in the right direction for research. So if I'm asking, like, if I want to know something about space, I can ask it and then ask for sources and then kind of go down the rabbit hole that way, using it a little bit as like an assistant or to bounce ideas off of, or to like say, one of the coolest things I did was tell it a few different pieces of a mystery and then ask it like, what could be the conspiracy behind all this, and then it came up with ways of connecting them that I thought was neat. But
It's a great
as a writing
resource
tool,
and tool for research and
yeah.
creating plot, or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think when we're talking about how these economic models of producing shows and television content work, it's important that human beings and human creativity is written into protections, basically, right? Because we need, if we need to have human beings in control of these things. We don't want it to, you know, even at like a philosophical level, like we don't want machines telling stories that machines are going to then be learning from. You know what I mean? Like there has to be a human being in charge, I think, philosophically, of the stories we tell each other. But
Yeah. I mean, I think that eventually it comes to, like, right now it's still a question of capabilities and quality, right? Like an AI
it won't
right
be
now.
eventually, right?
Yeah, exactly. Eventually it will be a question of like philosophy and ethics. Right now it's still
Which is
capability.
why I think we need to talk. That's the important
Absolutely.
conversation to have, right? Yeah.
And I think that, you know, it's true that Avi once said that like everything is political. Um and that was something that he told you and I, Adam, and that we both kind of were talked into, is that like nothing you write can exist outside of the world. Like everything that you write is situated in the world and like humanity and what's going on and somehow connects to things. You literally can't write something in a silo and say this does not connect to anything at all. And so based on that, I think that I think that's kind of the difference between humans and AI in a way. Is that like humans can't write something disconnected from the conversation, and AI, at least right now, doesn't have that connection to the world.
Well, intentionality maybe, but like
Yeah.
because it's replicating works of humans, it will be political indirectly by replicating human work.
Yeah, it will be, but it's like it will be political in the parts that it's sampled and then like in
Yeah,
the
for sure.
response
And
to it, but it's not the same, like, that's I don't know, that's just an interesting thing to consider.
so getting back to, okay, well, there's a strike happening. Hollywood is very antagonistic towards writers in terms of not just a career, but also in terms of the work being produced. Like if you're coming to the studios, they don't really want your original screenplay. They'll want your original screenplay as proof of concept to get you a job on an existing IP. That's kind of the environment right now. I'm not saying that you can't get a great original work done, but it's done in spite of the system trends, not because of it, right? The system
Right.
trends are very much like, can we get a new bat cousin? Oh, let's do a show about Alfred the butler. Let's do a show about, like, they're just like scraping the barrel
Yeah.
for existing IP, because that's just what, I don't want to get too much into this, but like Hollywood is owned by Wall Street, and the death of the private film studio was kind of the beginning of the end for, um, at the end of the day, films being made for human beings to connect, like people taking risks. It's these systems of capitalist conglomeration are risk averse fundamentally, right? And it's now been deemed a risk to take a chance on an original story, which is really messed up. But what do you do with that information? Like, what do you do when the career pathways of traditional film and television are kind of insulated against A, new ideas, but B, also treating and paying people well? And I think regardless of if you ultimately aspire or want to have a career in those systems, you need to empower yourself to create, be an artist and create, right? Whatever the medium, whether that's comic books, whether that's short films, whether that's a web series, whether that's even like just short form story content, whether that's an audio drama, whether that's your own independent feature film, whatever it is, I think more writers should be encouraging themselves to find outlets and to tell stories and to like reach people in the world with a vibrant aspiration for that, rather than having everything being like trying to get into a system that doesn't care about authenticity at all.
Yeah, it's true. And it's kind of like, I know when you and I were talking about this before, we started talking about this idea of finding passion for movies again and like finding kind of like the magic in what introduced us to screenwriting in the first place, and then kind of tying that to remembering that the objective of screenwriting is to see it on the screen. You know, you're writing something that is not the final product to see on the screen, and kind of
Or the laptop.
or the laptop. That is a screen though. So
yeah, that is a screen. That is a screen. When you say the screen, you know, people say the silver screen, you know,
the
whatever.
silver
It's such a dead metaphor.
screen. Yeah.
But it's like connecting with human beings. Like when you watch, it's about telling stories and having those stories like reach people and touch them and remove them or make them laugh, you know, or whatever. I think so many screenwriters are pushed into, okay, now you just have to develop competitive spec material that would fit in the system constantly, you know, and there's a place for that. And also, like, if you want to do that, do it. But I really just think there's not enough dialogue around take chances, make the weird film that nobody wants. Like a great example, and I'm a big fan of David Lynch, but like his first film, Eraserhead, which I also don't think is a structured film. It's barely even a story. It's a mood poem that for 90 minutes, it's very strange. He spent 7 years of his life on that film. It was his student film. It was a 15-page script. He turned into a 90-page movie. Tells you everything you know about this movie, everything you need to know about it. But like he spent 7 years on it, doing a paper route, on and off money, taking donations from people, like just to make the film. And all in his head was, oh, it's going to be shown one night. He spent 7 years for a movie to be shown one night at one place. And the only real thing that was driving him forward, I saw a documentary about it, and it was really interesting to sort of like, wow, the guy just made it without any commercial expectation whatsoever, was to just make it. It was a film, it was a vision in his head he wanted to make. And that was the only real, that was enough for him to spend 7 years making something. And we don't have enough artists who are like, just trying to make something in spite of commercial systems and expectations.
Yeah.
There's such a generational sense of like, well, how many views did it get?
Yeah, it's all very metric-y now. And it's sometimes, I think, like, especially when the industry and like what's going on in the industry can so easily make us feel jaded about writing overall. It's so important to remember kind of the things that brought you in to writing and to try to rediscover those again. And, you know, I think a lot of us got into screenwriting because as kids, we might have made movies or put on shows or done things like that. And then it kind of evolved into a love of screenwriting. Adam, did you make movies as a kid, or what was your deal?
Not as a kid. I did want to be a writer though. That was the thing. I wanted to like write like short stories and novels when I was like really young. And I started making some short films with my friends in high school. That's kind of when I started doing that stuff. They were terrible,
Good.
but oh, they were terrible. Oh yeah. That was. I starred in some of them. They've been scrubbed from the internet, thankfully.
Never forever. I hope one day.
I can't find them actually. I can't find them. I can't find them. So that means that they're gone. But like, yeah, no, like there's the first time you start making things, there's like kind of a childlike joy that I just think more people need to discover because it makes good art. It makes people take risks. We're so risk averse as a creative culture right now. Especially young people, you know, there was a statistic about like, you know, asking ninth grade and Gen Xers when they were in ninth grade versus current kids who are ninth grade, like how comfortable do you feel taking risks? It was something like 48% of Gen Xers were like, oh, I feel comfortable taking risks sometimes. And like 28% of current generation feel comfortable taking risks. And that's because of how horrible the world seems to be and is, and a lot of factors. But like, I think it affects the arts too, you know, like there's so many people who are afraid of how something will be judged, or afraid of like a failure or something not working out, not taking the chance, you know, and that is not what creates the things you really remember. I mean, I was thinking like, you know, I'm always talking about like, Alexie, you and I both talk about like, oh, the perfectly structured movie, like, oh, this was a tight spec, or oh, this was really well positioned, and this is a good read, tight 90-minute script. John is always loves the 90-minute movie, right? But the stuff that like I really think back to as like that was a movie that moved me, or like I love that's one of my favorite movies. Like I've got There'll Be Blood poster back there. That is not a tight movie. That is not a good spec.
Yeah.
It's got long, sprawling 15-page scenes, monologues. But it moved me. Like it's the stuff that takes risks. That's what that's what people remember.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of my favorite films were indie films, right? So like smaller budget, someone kind of making it, like eventually they got distribution, like Juno and stuff, but
Yeah.
starting smaller. And I think that there's a magic in it. And I don't know, there's a magic in making things. And I kind of hope that if anything comes out of, if anything kind of from this strike affects people who have not yet broken in, I hope it's thinking about that you can make stuff on your own. Like you don't necessarily need to be a part of that system directly right now. Like there's still magic in making your own stuff and kind of going back to what brought you into this field in the first place.
And just as a human being who's an artist,
Yeah.
finding the sparks that give you that childlike joy of rediscovery, and that feeling is never connected to, okay, I need to write a tight, bespoke, elevated genre film, because those are all first of all, those are commercially expected terms. You want to like get, when you're creating things, create things that delight yourself, because that's how you really surprise other people. That's where you get to the great territory. Not to say that it will work out or it'll be good or that it won't fail, but like I wish more people would take chances on the things that will fail. And the tools for making things are so much more readily available than before. Everybody's been saying that, but like I'll just end my thought on there was a Martin Scorsese was at a Q&A a few years ago, and this young filmmaker asked him, well, what's your advice to a young filmmaker? Which is like the most generically asked question everybody asks all these famous people. And he said, make your own film industry. And that's that's an interesting note from somebody who's like extremely successful and worked in the industry for so much. But like part of that is like, Martin Scorsese can't raise money. He has difficulty raising money sometimes for his project. Because he's trying to do something that's so against the trend of $100 million drama films that are 3 hours long, right? For theatrical release. True. Right. Like the market isn't encouraging those types of films. So it makes sense. But like, if Martin Scorsese has trouble raising $100 million for anything, like you think there's maybe a problem, in terms of like the people who care about things, but like his advice, make your own film industry, I think is really good for young people. Like make great stories, put them out there. I don't know, take chances, try things, do the new thing that's going to surprise everybody, that everybody's going to write think pieces about 10 years from now. I remember when Broad City did their web series that turned into a TV show. Everyone tried to do that, but they just like put their story up. I don't think they were expecting it picked up into a TV show based on that idea. They just like wanted to make something and they did it.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, that reminds me of Octavia, who we had on here before, who made acted out a little web series with The Sims, right? Like using Sims to kind of animate the stories that she was writing, and then had friends friends and some people that she found do the voices and things, and just doing whatever it takes to kind of make the thing and put it out there. And I've been thinking more and more about that as as time goes on, just kind of remembering the joy of like when you wanted to just make something.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
No, you go. I didn't know anything.
I was just saying that, when I first started thinking about movies, I was making movies before I thought about like what it would mean to make real movies, if that makes sense. Like as a kid, my uncle had a camera, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. And he at one point wanted to, I guess, test it, like use it. So he shot a little movie with me and my cousin. It was not like a movie. It was like a 5-minute movie called Allie and Alexie's Jungle Adventure. and we climbed on a playset, and then I fought a stuffed bear because I was a star, and I did my own stunts because I jumped off of the playset and landed on the bear, which was not directed to me. That was not told for me to do that. I did that of my own
You improvise
volition.
that.
I improvised it because I was inspired. And then I remember that he let me use the camera. And so we shot our next film, which was Anna Jones and the Temple of Gloom. And basically, we had the camera on a tripod, and I didn't know I was allowed to move it. So it's all from the same angle in the basement. And my cousin played like an Indiana Jones type person. And we kept just like making different sets in the middle of this cement basement. And that was my second film, Anna Jones. What was handy about that is that we had a life-size Barbie that was actually the size of my cousin, and we could use that for stunts. It was very impressive, if I say so myself. Um, and then I just kept doing it. It was just fun, and I kind of want to get back to just doing things that are fun and not worrying as much about like, oh, what's the commercial value of this? Which, if you're making it yourself, you don't have to think about that so much. But yeah. So we have a question here saying,
Yes.
how can we, non-WGA, best support WGA members while we work on our own stuff?
Here. I'm gonna share if you're in California, or I'm gonna share a Google spreadsheet that which I saw, which was some resources. And if you're in Los Angeles, you can help the picketers, and you can also, like where there's carpooling or community fund you can help with, and food, all of that stuff.
Oh, here it is. Let me grab it for
You can also picket. I think if you just talk to strike captain, there are ways you can help if you are in New York or Los Angeles, and I think some other places too.
Yeah.
There's also a fund, I forget what it's called, that helps support the crew members who are not WGA, who will be affected by an inevitable strike, which is going to be a real thing.
Yeah.
There are lots. The answer is there's a lot of stuff you can do, regardless of your transparency and sharing the message, and using whatever platform you have that's related to film and television, or just your
And
personal use, to talk about this. Raise
and also
awareness.
just like not being annoying on Twitter, I think that that's something we can all do to help. It's the little things.
Not being annoying on Twitter.
Well, I mean, I see these people on Twitter that are like, these writers are so selfish. Don't they know that a lot of us depend on our shows to help us feel happy, and they're taking our happiness? And it's like, that's the most backwards compliment I've ever heard. I'm sure that it affects their happiness to be able to pay rent. So, not being annoying on Twitter, item number one. And then participating in the picket lines and strikes if you can goes a long way. And yeah, I only know of those in New York and LA, but it's possible that there's more. And yes, we can definitely share this spreadsheet in the video description or the audio description and in our Discord. So we will go ahead and post that link for people if they want to participate.
Another thing you can do, not saying you have to, but Netflix is the worst of all of them. If you want to cancel your next Netflix subscription, cancel your Netflix subscription. And then when it prompts you to ask why, say pay writers fairly.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's one thing you can do. Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
I'm not saying that will really work. It's at a system level, because historically, unions work and boycotts don't work. Boycotts just don't work. Yeah.
They just don't
do anything.
They worked for Wizards of the Coast when they recently tried to do that crappy thing where they were messing with the Dungeons
such a
and
small
Dragons
insular
license.
community. The larger the scale of the audio of the product, the
Yeah.
less like, I mean, I just don't think there's historical examples of boycotts working the same way unions do. Unions are the most direct leverage. Unions and the power to strike is the most direct leverage to change company behavior. I think it's the
Adam,
only thing that really works.
the Boston Tea Party,
That's
historical
that's
example.
that's you're right. You're right. But again, it's like there's
I'm just kidding.
but
I'm just
there's a
kidding.
difference between like material government forces at scale relative to how large a company and economy is, right? Like Boston and the United States and the Britain in the 17th century is you can smaller groups of people could mobilize larger impacts than now, which we have billions of more humans. So sorry,
Well,
I'm
yeah,
being
because they
annoying.
made up of
I'm being really annoying right now. I'm
you
being
know,
really
you can
annoying.
make a just to compensate for that annoyingness, you can do a video essay and post it here comparing the Boston Tea Party to um, you know, unsubscribing from Netflix. You can go for it.
Yeah. I would also, Alexie, if you want to share that doc in the
Yep,
Discord,
that's what
you
I'm
can.
doing
Yeah.
right now.
This was published in so it's not like a private link. This was published. So yeah.
Here we go. Live in LA and want to help the WGA strike? Here's one way you can. Posted.
Yeah, you can also DM pre-WGA strike at Twitter to ask specifically how you can help as a pre-WGA member. You can also, or associate member, if you have some points. Sorry, points, meaning the points you accumulate on your way to getting a WGA, which you need 24 points to become a member.
Yep.
The whole thing.
So briefly what that is that in order to get into the WGA, you get points for each project for projects that you make that qualify.
Yes.
So stuff like put out by a studio or a TV show or a web series or different amounts of points. I believe that it's still one big feature is enough points to get you in.
Oh yeah, if you sell a feature and it enters production, you get I believe you get membership. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Whereas if you
otherwise you're
option
counting
something and
points.
it doesn't enter production, that's not quite enough.
Speaking from experience.
Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. But yeah,
It's
so
you go.
No, it's okay.
What are we doing next week, Alexie? Have we decided? We're gonna
I don't
surprise
think that we've
people.
decided yet. I think it's a new month,
Right.
May's new month, so we are open to doing whatever people are interested in us breaking down. So let us know if there's something specific you want us to get into or talk about. A film you'd like us to analyze, anything like that, we'd be down to check out your suggestions.
I'm kind of interested in doing some conversations about unorthodox filmmaking and storytelling.
Yeah.
We've talked so much about the platonic ideal of a modern spec script and movies that follow that format. I'm kind of interested in maybe talking about like the slow burns, the long and boring movies.
Yeah,
Not the
and shooting
Titans.
your own stuff. That's something else I really want to get into.
Yeah, I want to direct more. That's kind of my personal takeaway from all of this is like, I mean, I've personally been so frustrated by the system in some ways that I'm like, just make some stuff. Let's do it. Come on, let's just stop asking for permission. These systems that don't really care about whether or not something's good or not, and make something that you think is good. At the level you can. Even if it's small, and to stop worrying about what other people think, because at the end of the day, nobody's thinking about you as much as you think you are, or as much as you think they are.
It's true. It is true.
All right. On that note, thank you so much, everybody, for joining.
We'll see you next time.